Welcome back to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. Joining me today is a familiar face that you all have not seen in a while, and my man, Matt Spencer here. And I asked this strictly for the fans because I really don't care. But Matt, how you doing, bud?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Glad to be back. Of course, I've been preoccupied with a little bit of high school basketball. North Oldham went to the Sweet 16 this year. 5 years in the making. Man, it was a dream come true. I don't know if there'll ever be a feeling like that again. I'm sure there will be, but to actually get there, to actually dominate the way we did in the Region 8 title game, and then to win a game with a group full of juniors, got six to seven guys returning next year for hopefully what would be a title run. So we'll see. It's exciting. So a lot of hard work. They put in a lot of hard work. The coaching staff put in a lot of hard work. So that basketball season's over with, and so I can get back to some more really hobbies. So, but been going good.
That's good to hear. I still remember when a lot of your juniors on your team this year were freshmen and eighth graders or so when I was still covering sports for the Sentinel News. And of course, Dallas was one that stood out from an early age, and, just seeing him grow and develop into the player he's becoming has been a sight to see. I know from your standpoint too, getting to see it every day in practice it's a whole nother ball game. Mm-hmm. But, obviously, you all have a lot of bright spots to look forward to next year, a lot coming back, and, make another good run. So, I'll be rooting for you all. And I never thought I'd ever cheer for North Oldham, but obviously when you came on the coaching staff, I kind of didn't have a choice. So,
it feels like, being at North Oldham the last 5 years feels like you're Duke. Nobody wants to cheer for you.
That's a very accurate, as you all know, as the fans all know, that is a very accurate standpoint. But obviously, getting a little ahead of ourselves, we will talk plenty about Duke here in a little bit. But I think one thing's for sure. One guy who's really lucky is Matt McClellan, because he's not going to be on the show today. He's grinding, working his butt off, but he's not going to hear the bickering back and forth between me and you on today's podcast. So he might have lucked out in that aspect. All jokes aside, it's going to be a good time. But, we have getting to the most exciting part of the college basketball season. We are officially down to the final four teams, and and on next Monday night, we'll be crowning a national champion. And, before we get too ahead of ourselves, because the fans know with you and me on the podcast, we know which game we're going to be talking about. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we do have another matchup. You know what? I got a little ahead of ourselves too. I'm feeling a little blue with this these Final Four matchups, Matt. All blue.
A lot of blue bloods.
A lot of blue bloods. A lot of blues, just blue colors. Just a lot of blue.
It's kind of funny because that commercial's been floating around with Vince Carter, Christian Laettner, Devin Booker, and then I forgot her name. She played for you. Is it Sue Bird?
Sue Bird, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And of course, that's you get the Louisville ladies tonight, and then you also got the UConn women against NC State tonight. It's in a matchup I'm looking forward to watching tonight. Personally, I think NC State can beat UConn, but we'll see.
They can. My thing is UConn went so long without Paige Becker, so they've in a lot of ways they've had to step up.
Yeah.
So I think they were better for playing without Beckers for all the period for that period of time, because it forced other people, when they've been so reliant on her in the past, to step up. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, UConn's a very well-coached team. This is Gino Auriemma we're talking about. Man, he's as good as they get.
It's amazing what he can do. He can, and not only that, when you have the amount of talent that comes to UConn, you can almost plug and replace and shift some things around to soften the blow of losing such a great player as Paige. But I do find it interesting that I was watching a documentary on Haley Van Lith the other day. Great story. If you haven't checked it out, of course, everybody knew about her connection with Kobe and Gigi, but really kind of dive deep into the relationship with her father. So, and how they worked and they worked and they worked and they worked. And it's amazing to see what hard work can do. So Great, a lot of great storylines.
The thing about Haley Van Lith that I've always noticed is that she's always surrounds herself with those who work hard because it's one of that mentality that lions don't surround themselves with sheep or whatever the saying goes, because she also was very she also dated Jalen Suggs for a while. I don't know if they're still together, but I mean they were able to connect due to their work ethic and all that. But she's able to surround herself with people that want to work. She has a vision, and she's surrounding herself with those who actually want to be great as well. And I think that's been nothing but good for her because she's taken a major step in the right direction this year. When she was first recruited to Louisville, was known as a very good high school scorer, had shown flashes in the past, but hadn't really put a bunch of consistent work together. But this year she's really taken that next step, and she's starting to score those 20-point games pretty regularly. And now we still got to think a couple more years with this girl. And I mean, there's sky's the limit how good she could be.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think Louisville might get over the hump one of these days in women's basketball. So, I mean, they keep on knocking at the door. I don't see why there's any reason why they can't. So.
Yeah. If they keep knocking, eventually somebody's going to answer. So,
yep.
But anyways, getting into the first matchup of the Final Four, we have the Villanova Wildcats and the Kansas Jayhawks, which of course, the Kansas Jayhawks, I feel like is one of those teams that they feel like they can go to the Final Four every year, or they can lose in the first and second round. You just never know. But they always have that feel. They usually dominate their conference. In 26 years of being in the Big 12, they've won 20 times. So have you gotten a chance to really watch Kansas this year a lot?
A little bit, yeah. Of course, I was a little surprised with the way they played against Kentucky. Obviously, with the Big 12, I think the Big 12 has gotten much stronger over the last couple of years with Texas Tech and Baylor making strong runs in the NCAA tournaments. Kansas has always been there. Of course, you can't forget about Texas. Texas is always, challenging. But, Kansas, well coached. They've got a star-studded lineup. And they've been really the favorites outside of Gonzaga, to win the title. And they're really going up against a Villanova team who I have an absolute ton of respect for. Jay Wright is an absolute genius when it comes to X's and O's. And I would not discount Villanova in this game, even though they've lost one of their best players and more. Jay Wright can really figure out a way to stretch a game out, implement a game plan, especially with a long week ahead of practice and, preparation. I appreciate his vision, the way he coaches. I've taken a lot of things that Jay Wright has done over the last couple of years into some of my coaching technique. He plays a very efficient style of basketball. They shoot good shots. They shoot he has a rule with his 3-point shooters. If somebody closes out with the hand down, it's an automatic shot. Don't even think about it. And I kind of love that because it really gets your players outside of thinking. When they start thinking and they start second guessing themselves, that's when mistakes happen. But they really get the ball into the paint. They move. They play efficient. They play tough defense, and they hit free throws. So one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. So even though I'm feeling Kansas in this game, and I think the spread is accurate at 8 points, I would not discount. I would almost take Villanova on the spread.
I think, like you said, the spread is pretty accurate because Kansas, they have a ton of experience. Abaji winning Big 12 Player of the Year, and McCormick, who's been there for 8 to 10 years, it feels like, and Christian Braun, who I think is one of the most underrated players in college basketball. But really, to me, the biggest turnaround for Kansas being able to make this run has been the health of their point guard, Remy Martin. They missed a big chunk of him throughout the course of the year. Having him back has been just absolutely detrimental to them, or not. Complete opposite words. That's been
not detrimental. The other word.
The complete opposite detrimental. But I think his health has been insanely important. And one thing that really stood out about something Bill Self said to me the other day, about Martin, it made a lot of those soundbite headlines that the media loves to pick up on, because they talked about with Remy Martin's health this season and him not winning Big 12 Player of the Year. He asked about it. He was asked if this was considered a disappointing season for Martin. And he just kind of said, well, he was never going to win Big 12 Player of the Year. And at first, you listen to him and you're like, whoa, did he really just say that about his player? But then he goes on to say, well, no, it's more about how we run our game plan. We play more through our forwards and our guards from the scoring aspect, and Martin just facilitate. And Martin does majority of the facilitating, so he just won't put up the numbers that the Big 12 committee usually looks for to win Big 12 Player of the Year, and which my preseason pick was Abaji anyway, and that's who ended up winning it. And that really came into fruition with how good of a season he had. But yeah, but obviously Martin's health has been the most valuable thing for them. And obviously, so with the spread being at 8 points, I think that's very accurate just with the team they have and the star-studded lineup that you mentioned. However, like you said with Villanova, crazy all season long, I never thought they looked like a Final Four team. Duke scrimmaged them right before the season started, and they won by about 20 points in that close scrimmage. Paulo had 29 and 12. And then, I figured that was more than anything, I thought, that's a good look for Duke. And because I always thought Villanova was a good team. And watching them throughout the season, I kept watching like, okay, they're not really impressing. They're winning games. They're a solid team, but they're not really standing out the way a lot of these Villanova teams have these last several years, especially the two title teams did, the way the two title teams did. But obviously none of that matters because once the tournament starts, you're 0-0, and they just found a way to win. The game against Houston, for prime example.
They were my only Final Four pick.
Villanova was?
Kentucky, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Villanova.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, because Villanova was the one team out of the four that have – well, okay, might get a little ahead of myself. But Villanova was not a team I expected to make the Final Four all season long. But, of course, tournament comes out and, they just find a way to win. The Houston game was not pretty. It was probably the ugliest offensive game I've seen since the 2011 national championship team against Butler and UConn. Yeah. But they just find a way. And I think a lot of what you said about Jay Wright, I actually respect because he's probably my second favorite coach in college basketball behind Krzyzewski, just because of how intuitive and how inventive he is and how creative he can get with his schemes. I credit him a lot for basketball turning the way it did with the small ball. Because he's been running that from jump. Mm-hmm. So would you say that's accurate to say that he's really been one of the true innovators of the small ball lineups?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a 41 set, but really it's a positionless type of basketball. Of course you need big guys who can play and rebound the basketball. But that 41 sets and then his press and also his defense, I just love the way his offense is constructed because it gives more power to the players. And I've always liked it, and this is not a knock against Calipari, but I've always liked the 41 sets that he runs better than the dribble drive. I like the spacing that it gives you. I like the options, the reads, the angles. Really, there are just certain rules that you have to follow, and you're more just giving power to the players to be an artist, mm-hmm. and you're encouraging them from Jump Street. You're not going to get it day one, but you'll get it by the end of the season. And when you have when you have chemistry, when you're team oriented, when you move the ball the way they do, I think you can kind of shrink the gap. You kind of saw that a little bit with St. Peter's a little bit. So, playing efficient basketball, taking good shots, working the ball to get a good shots, not settling for bad shots, not rushing, being emotional, taking bad shots. So, Villanova, Jay Wright, one of the best coaches the last 20 years.
Absolutely. I mean, and arguably has been the most successful coach the last 10 years, if we want to go that far. I mean, with 2 championships and I believe 18 and 16. One against one I know that you remember all too well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tough game.
Very tough game. But very one of the better games.
No, he went to the Final Four in 2009. I want to say he went before that too. So, I mean, he's been to a couple Final Fours. He's won 2 national championships. Yeah, he's really got it rolling over there at Villanova.
Yeah, as much respect as I have for Jay Wright, I am going to agree with you. I do believe that Kansas does eventually do win this matchup. I think, but like you said, I think it is going to be shorter than. I would not go with 8 points. I would definitely take Villanova on the points on that. But yeah, I think it comes down to the talent the talent level that Kansas has. I think they just have too much star power, and for another reason that I'm going to mention later. So unless you have anything else to say about Kansas and Villanova, I think we want to transition to the game that everyone wants to hear you and me talk about.
Yeah,
and as
kind of the
crazy as
reason
it
why I
is,
texted you.
exactly. Which it's crazy enough to imagine that this is the first time that Duke and Carolina have ever met in the NCAA tournament. You would think with all the matchups, you would think it would have happened at some point. But how fitting is it that it comes in Coach K's last year?
Yeah, it's almost storybook a little bit, regardless of the way it shapes out. I mean, Carolina's season's been a little bit of a storybook itself. But, you got to remember, though, this isn't the only time they've met in the postseason. They met in the NIT back in the early 70s. So
right.
Carolina always, for the most part, dominated the series leading up until 1980. But yeah, no, it's how fitting is it for Coach K to have an opportunity to get some revenge against North Carolina for what they did a couple weeks ago at Cameron Indoor. So
as much as I would love for Duke to just come in and get revenge for Carolina spoiling K's last home game and just smacking him like Will did Chris Rock last night at the Oscars. Obviously, this Carolina team has just been playing at another level, and I really noticed it in that game, in that final game at Cameron Indoor for Coach K, just how well and some of the guys like RJ Davis and Brady Manick have just been stepping up. But as a fan that's been watching them all season, when did you really see Carolina take that next step?
So, of course, I was always passively watching them from afar. I didn't really get to sit down and watch a lot of games. The things that really were a head scratcher to me was early on, we would play some, I guess you would call them tier 2 teams from the NCAA, and we would beat tier 2 teams. We would be competitive against tier 2 teams. It's just that when we would go up against a Kentucky or a Purdue or Miami or even Duke at North Carolina, they would lose by 30. So there was no in between. It was they either win or lose by a small margin, or they lose by 30. And the head scratcher for me was Pittsburgh. It was just like, what the heck? You lose by 20 plus points to a really, really bad Pitt team. But it was a Syracuse game at home before Duke. And you can see that they kind of turned a page. Caleb Love has been huge. I can remember they were down by 1 point with about 12 or 13 seconds left. And he just decided, he was going to go pull a Damian Lillard from about 35 feet, and he stroked it. And ball went through the hoop. They went up by 2. They ended up winning in overtime. And I was just like, man, that's a really confident shot. Because it wasn't one of those where, they could have worked the ball and got a good shot, but he was just like, you're going to leave me wide open. I'm confident to take this shot. And it went through the net, and I was like, that's odd. And, of course, Bacot had always played well. Brady Manick had always played well. It was really getting those sophomores to kind of buy in and play every single possession. And that's what RJ Davis and Caleb Love had kind of indicated, that they took possessions off.
Mm-hmm.
And so they stopped taking possessions off. And, that's really indicative of that 0 points or 30 points. Do I believe that I can win this game? Well, if I don't believe I can win this game, I'm just going to, I'm going to come down here and throw up some bullshit. And we're not going to play team basketball. We're not going to look into our force in the posts. And it's just, at that point, it's just bad basketball. And against really, really good teams like a Miami, like a Duke, you're going to get beat by 30 points if you play that way. And so also, Hubert coming in, there was some things you got to work through with a new coach. But I think the thing that was most encouraging from Hubert's standpoint, was it was right after they beat Duke and Coach Krzyzewski over at Cameron Indoor. Armando Bacot came up and hugged Hubert. And it wasn't one of those hugs where he kind of just hugged him and ran into the locker room. He hugged him and he held Hubert or Coach Davis for a good 3 minutes. And it was one of those hugs where it's just like, man, that means something more than just a regular hug. These players really love Coach Davis. And so those small little things, when you start to see that, you're just like, damn, they might have something here. Duke was always an impressive team from when I saw them in Vegas against Gonzaga. They always impressed me then. And so it was an impressive win nonetheless to really take Duke's best punch that night, because it wasn't an easy game. Duke was up by 7 points midway through the first. Towards the end of the first quarter or first half, Carolina was able to shrink that gap. It was a 3-point deficit at the half, and then it was back and forth. Where the Carolina team of December and January probably would have folded. They kept on coming back, and they kept on hitting big shots. They kept on getting into the lane. RJ Davis, getting into the lane. So that was really the turning point. And, they dropped a bad game. They had a bad game against Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament. They only hit 1 3. And Virginia Tech, they had a great weekend, so that was kind of the turning point. Syracuse, after the Pittsburgh loss, Syracuse game leading up to Duke. So, yeah.
It was interesting to me because when I got the news that Roy Williams was retiring, it came on April 1st. So I thought the whole thing was a joke at first. And I think, which I've always had one rule that I feel like if you're gonna have run a big story, don't do it on April 1st, because everyone's just gonna think it's. But he obviously retired so suddenly, and I think with Hubert Davis coming in, it was hard to really give North Carolina expectations this year. And I kept noticing that North Carolina was never ranked, but I would always look at the record and I'm thinking, their record is a little bit better than where they're ranked. I think this North Carolina team's a little better than given credit for at times. But like you said, would have a bad loss against Pittsburgh or so on. And then they would go play a tier 1 team and, lose by 30, as you would say. But the way they've been playing as of recent is just amazing. And obviously, that was one of my big fears coming into this tournament, that obviously with it being Coach K's last year, I want to see them go out on top. But one of my fears was that a Kentucky or a North Carolina was going to win the title. And how embarrassing would that be for a Duke fan to watch North Carolina or Kentucky cut down the nets? And with us playing as historically as this is going to be, with us playing this Saturday, I'm kind of scared. I'm not going to lie, because I like the run that this Duke team's on right now. Like you said, Virginia Tech had a great weekend, but won the ACC tournament. But after that, this Duke team's looked locked in. We've gotten performances from Mark and holding down the paint. Paulo is starting to consistently look like Paulo again, and it's not going from a game-to-game basis. He's playing game after game after game, looking like a potential number 1 overall pick. The guy who's really stood out to me that's been the difference maker has been Jeremy Roach. All season long, if you go on any of the social media sites or look at Duke media, Jeremy Roach is consistently been the most criticized player on the roster, because he was a top 20 recruit coming out of John Paul in high school. Was known, was drawing comparisons to someone like Kyle Lowry. And I think also just being the point guard for Duke historically, just what that means, I think the bar was set for him so high. And people were expecting to get performances like a Tyus Jones-esque or a Bobby Hurley or a Jason Williams. And that's just not him. He's good, he makes smart decisions, and he plays good defense. But he's really taken his game to the next level and being one of our more valuable pieces. And I think that's one thing that's been the X factor for Duke being able to look as good as they have the last several weeks. And just for me, getting into battles with like Michigan State and Texas Tech and just seeing the resilience that they have gives me hope. And I'd like to believe that they're going to avenge the loss, but obviously I'm North Carolina's playing great, man. So
well, Duke, it's kind of funny if you look at all their games, they've had a similar type of run.
mm-hmm.
Of course, an easy first game against Marquette for us, easy first game for you guys. I totally forgot who you guys played. But Michigan State, of course, we jumped out on a huge lead against Baylor, but 13 of the last 14 fouls were called against North Carolina in the last 10 minutes against Baylor, which for the life of me, I can't understand because Baylor was the aggressor, but I'm not going to go down that road because Carolina ended up pulling it out. And I'm sick and tired of these flagrant 2 brush, whatever. Brady getting tossed in that game. I was just like, it wasn't intentional. I mean, the guy that he was tussling with had been a punk all game, kind of almost like a Dennis Rodman a little bit, but neither here nor there. Carolina got the victory, and then, Duke had to come back and fight against Michigan State. So a Hall of Fame coach and Tom Izzo, it looked like they were going to be on the ropes, and it looked like Baylor had all the momentum, and then Duke's final 5 minutes against Texas Tech was very impressive. I personally thought that Texas Tech played a much better game.
They did.
And if you look over the stats, they out-rebounded Duke. Duke committed more turnovers. Texas Tech shot more shots from the field. But Duke was able to get into the lane and draw a lot of contact, get a lot of fouls called, and go to the free throw line and convert. And then at the end of the game, there was a couple shots that Duke hit. They hit their last 7 shots down the stretch, I believe. It was the last 7 or 8 shots down the stretch.
7 shots, yeah. You had it right,
yeah.
7 shots.
And, they were able to pull out a game against a team that Texas Tech, I want to say they were favored by a point or 2 going into that game. Yep. So that was an impressive win for Duke. And then, of course, Arkansas, they just were not in the same class as Duke. But, Carolina had a tough game against UCLA. I thought UCLA did enough to win. But when you have a guy with the confidence of Caleb Love like right now and the way he's shooting the basketball from, NBA range and sometimes the logo, you saw a little bit of that confidence against Syracuse. You saw it definitely against Duke. You've seen it leading up in this tournament. Hit 2 shots like that. Sometimes the ball just bounces your way. And, of course, St. Peter's, they had a great run. But Cinderella, the clock does strike midnight every once in a while. So, and here we are, North Carolina Duke. I think it was funny that you said this the other day, or I said this earlier, talking about being embarrassed. I was out the other night and I was watching North Carolina play St. Peter's, and they really hadn't talked about it a lot, where North Carolina was going to pass up Kentucky in all-time NCAA tournament victories. And, of course, there was a group off to the side, and they were cheering for St. Peter's, and it was obvious that they were Kentucky fans.
Yeah.
But they said that stat, and it was clear that North Carolina was going to end up winning. They were just like, oh, my gosh, this tournament could get any worse. Because Kansas had just passed them up in all-time victories, Carolina, and Kentucky had suffered an embarrassing loss to St. Peter's. And Matt Jones echoed that on Twitter the other day, where you have 4 of the top 5 programs of the last 20 years, and Kentucky lost to St. Peter's. So it is embarrassing for a Kentucky fan right now. But they'll be back. They're blue blood. So, we're here.
Yeah, we're here. I mean, obviously the right shades of blue are making it to the Final Four and not that royal blue in Lexington. But obviously I got to throw a UK dig on this podcast. It just wouldn't be a Less Is More Sports podcast without a UK dig. I mean, I just look at, I mean, it's getting to be such a surreal moment for me because, obviously I'm only 28 years old. I've never actually admitted my age on the podcast, so that is a first. History has been made. But 28 years old, all I've known is a Coach K, Coach Duke team, and the fact that regardless of what happens, this is going to be his last weekend as the Duke head coach. And although I'm excited, I'm excited to start the new regime, I'm just trying to cherish every moment that there is right now, just because how much he's meant to our program. I remember you and I have talked in the conversation prior that this Duke Carolina was not a rivalry until Coach K got to Durham and was able to challenge Dean Smith. And obviously it evolved into the greatest rivalry in college basketball history. And you and I, living here in Louisville, Kentucky, you and I are always having this debate with the local fans on why it is the best rivalry in college basketball. Documentary, books, whatever has just been written on the series. And this just adds to it this weekend that, in Coach K's last year, he's going to meet North Carolina in the Final Four. And I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight. My hair's already receding enough, and I think I'm going to start going real bald this weekend. So,
it's funny you say that because I saw something the other day that, everybody in the country wants this matchup and they've dreamed of this matchup, but real fans of both schools don't want this matchup because it's going to take 10 years off our life.
Exactly. I mean, hold on. Okay, I do have to ask this though. Because I feel like it's one of those questions I feel like I have to ask. I feel like you may or may not agree with me, but I feel like there is an answer that we know should be the answer. But Duke or Carolina, which team is under more pressure this weekend?
Duke.
Oh yeah, that's
easy.
Easy. I had to. Yeah,
because North Carolina has exceeded expectations under a first-year Hubert Davis. You lose three guys. You have question marks. You have Walker Kessler walking out, and really that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Roy Williams returning. North Carolina has really exceeded expectations. They're an 8 seed that made the Final Four. Now you can argue that they're probably a 4 or 5 seed. I would have thought that they were probably a 6 or 7 seed given their resume, but they gave us an 8 seed. I thought that was fair, but they also gave us the weakest 1 seed. So I thought that was also fair. I would have taken a Baylor in a second round game, and we made the most of it. But with Duke, and you can stop me, but with Duke, the way I see it is, of course, it was somewhat of a rivalry before Coach Krzyzewski got there, but it wasn't the rivalry that we know it as today. And we can discuss that later. But Mike stepped on campus and said, hey, we're going after UNC. Make no bones about it. We're going to challenge Dean Smith in North Carolina. And he really has. I mean, you look at the last 42 years since he's been there. Carolina has won 5 national championships. Duke has won 5 national championships. Duke has been to 13 Final Fours. North Carolina has been to 14 Final Fours. Duke's played in 9 national championship games. Carolina's played in 7 national championship games. And they always flash the statistic every single time that they play. The last 100 meetings, it's 50-50, and they're separated by 2 points. And
sometimes no points.
Yeah, or no points, yeah.
Right.
And so Carolina could throw a dud and lose by 25, which I think is more surprising this year, that because all the games that they've ever had, it's always been close.
Yeah, yeah.
I expect no less that this will go down to the very end and it'll be one way or the other. But personally, I think that Duke is under a lot more pressure. You have Coach Krzyzewski retiring. And, that's a double-edged sword. They're going to play balls to the wall for him. It's going to be relentless. And I think the same could be said for North Carolina. They love Coach Hubert Davis, and they're going to play for him as well. So it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. But Duke is behind in the rivalry historically, not the last 40 years because it's even, but Duke is behind in the rivalry historically. There are question marks about Shire. You know, is he going to be able to fill the shoes that Coach Krzyzewski has, made? And personally, I think he can, and he probably will. But there are still question marks. And Hubert's already answered those question marks this year. He has guys that want to play for him. Recruits see this. You see an offense or you see a team that has made the Final Four and come back. So what is your take?
About which part? Because we kind of said a lot there.
Who has the most pressure?
Absolutely, dude. Without question. It's Coach K's last year. They got blown out on Coach K's last home game. They are under the immense pressure to get to not only win one last championship for Coach K. They're under immense pressure just to beat North Carolina this weekend. I mean, this Saturday, just because of what happened on Coach K's last home game. And I remember during the ACC tournament, of course, the soundbite that everyone remembers that when Duke was headed to the ACC championship game, they asked Paulo Banchero, who do you want to play? And without hesitation, UNC. So we know, even though he dodged the question this weekend, because he's like, you're not going to get me this time, because we all know what happened. UNC lost to Virginia Tech, who was having a great weekend. And so that Duke team didn't look prepared to play Virginia Tech because they were focusing all their energy on UNC. But I think he avoided that question just to be safe, just in case they weren't going to play UNC. But we all know that's who they want, or that's what they have shown that that's who they want. So they say all this. Now they have to show it. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. So, Paulo, if you're going to be a top 3 pick, we need to see it. Mark, you're rising in the draft stock. You're one of the best. In my opinion, I think you're the defensive player of the year. You need to play like it. Jeremy Roach, continue to play like you've been playing. AJ Griffin finally got a good game again under his belt against Arkansas. One guy that's really been concerning to me this tournament run has been Trevor Keels. If you watched in the first game against Kentucky, we thought Keels was going to be one of the more key guys on the season this year with the performance he had. But really, he in a lot of ways has been up and down. He's had some good games here and there, but I mean, he had nothing consistent. And so far this tournament game, he's probably been at least offensively speaking, a very low factor. He can play defense, and that's what gets him minutes. But I think if Duke's going to continue to win games and give Coach K his 6th championship, we're going to need to see Keels at some point. And I think what better time to show that than against North Carolina. So
I also think just going back to the historical factor, North Carolina doesn't necessarily need this because they have an edge in other categories. I think Duke needs this game more than North Carolina historically. It would, I guess the gap would close a little bit more. And it is tight in the last 20 years. So just because of how competitive it is. But yeah, I do think that, the pressure is on Duke. I saw an amazing statistic the other day, and it kind of just goes back to the way the media looks at Duke, the way the Vegas looks at Duke, as opposed to the way they look at North Carolina over the years. The last 10 games between Duke and North Carolina is 8-1 against the spread. And that just kind of goes to show, how tight these games are. It's either 4 points this way, 4 points this way, but it usually comes down to a bucket. I never know what to expect. I've stopped expecting anything out of this rivalry a long time ago.
Right.
It always finds a way to surprise me.
Just when you think you have it figured out, you don't at all.
Like I can remember the game 2 years ago. Carolina was having an awful season. Cole Anthony was injured nonstop, and Carolina rushed out to a 20-point lead, and Duke just chipped away, and they forced overtime, and then Carolina got a lead in overtime again, and then Duke tipped it in hit a runner or a tip in at the buzzer, and I was just sitting there, I was just like, did Duke just really win this game? It's amazing what this rivalry does.
I mean, you and I, me and Matt McClellan like to do a top 5 after every usually after every podcast episode, but I feel like that would be a disservice at some point because there are too many memories in this rivalry to really do like a top 5 at all. So, I mean, there's just been countless moments. Of course, I could tell you where I was at with the Austin Rivers shot. Duke was trailing big that game. And of course, Seth Curry and Austin Rivers get hot. And of course, Austin Rivers gets the switch on the pick with Tyler Zeller, crosses him up a couple times and just gets the space he needs and lets it go. Ironically enough, Austin Rivers was one of my least favorite one and done players to come through the Duke program, but he hit, ironically, one of the biggest shots that any of them have hit, arguably next to some of the ones Tyus Jones hit during his freshman year. But no, but I remember, but that game especially was just, unbelievable. And I remember our last championship team with Tyus Jones, Jaleel Okafor, Justice Winslow, and all them. And I remember how Duke was trailing for majority of that game too. I think Bryce Johnson was really having his way down low, and like most North Carolina, Roy Williams coached North Carolina teams, they crashed the glass and were able to get a lot of second chance points. And then Duke just chipped away. Tyus Jones hits a floater here. Jaleel gets a couple favorable matchups and gets somebody on his back hip and back on the post. And then of course Tyus Jones, absolute ice in his veins, just ices it in overtime. But there's too many games. I mean, I feel like every game is, as excited as I am for every game, I feel like I lose about 10 years of my life every freaking game in this rivalry.
Yeah. Well, what are some of your favorite? Well, you already named a favorite game because I was going to ask that question to you. One of my favorite memories of this rivalry was when Roy Williams in 2005, of course, Carolina had a team that was going to challenge for a national championship, but they still couldn't beat Duke. And they lost to them twice in 2004 with all those sophomores, Felton, McCants, May, I'm remembering some key contributors, but lost a couple of those games. And then they ended up going to Duke in a game where I was just like, okay, this is our year. We're supposed to go into Duke. We're supposed to take care of business. They lose by a point and they didn't get a final shot off. And all Raymond Felton and McCants are doing is staring at each other. And then, they come over to the Dean Dome, and that's the game where, Carolina's number 1 or number 2, Duke's number 4. They both got 2 good teams, but Carolina clearly has the better athletes. They're supposed to win this game, and the under 4 timeout comes and Duke is up by 9. Well, here we go again. Duke had an incredible run over Carolina for about 3 or 4 years because of the Doherty years. And, they just chipped away. They got it into Sean May, and then it was a missed free throw and an offensive rebound from Marvin Williams and an and one that gave them a 2-point lead. And you can hear the years of frustration of them losing close games to Duke come off the roof. I mean, the Roy Williams had said that's the loudest he's ever heard the Dean Dome is when Marvin Williams hit that and one shot. And of course, JJ Redick had a chance to, win the game. And at that point I was sitting there, I was like, he's going to hit it. Yeah. But he missed it. And, Carolina ended up winning the national championship that year. But that was one of my favorite memories. Of course, the Vince Carter, Antoine Jameson, Wojciechowski, Shane Battier, back and forth. Those games were epic. Those are some of my favorite memories. Yeah.
It's funny we talk about our favorite memories. I'm sure we can give some equal amounts of least favorite memories. And, for me, it's no debate which 2 are the least favorite for me. And I think it's more, and rather than ranking them 1 and 2, it's more 1A and 1B. 1A, I'll go for with relativity because it happened this year, was obviously North Carolina spoiling Coach K's last home game. This is the guy, this is our GOAT. This is the greatest coach arguably in college basketball history. This is, one of the most beloved coach to his fan base. And that has the utmost respect, and not only just the college basketball community, but the entire country. But everything points to he's supposed to win this game.
Yep.
That's what would be right. But you said pregame it wouldn't be the rivalry it is if North Carolina didn't spoil too. That's just how the rivalry is. And they did. And they did it convincingly. And so that was obviously a tough one. 1B, I would have to say JJ Redick's senior night at Cameron, because not only did that symbol the end of the Redick era, it was a symbol for the beginning of my most hated college basketball player of all time, Tyler Hansbrough, who just, when he hit that three at the top of the key, I'm like, oh shit, this is their night, guys. And JJ Redick was, growing up, that was my favorite Duke player. And to see his senior night get spoiled like this, especially by a freshman that would go on to be my most hated player in college basketball, was just demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I used it correctly that time.
No, yeah. And you could tell that towards the end of JJ Redick's career, he was forcing a lot of shots. He was short on a lot of shots. He was being overworked a little bit. So kind of felt a little bit for JJ. Not really, because he hit a ton of big shots over the years against Carolina that he had one coming. No, probably my least favorite memory. It was 2001 ACC championship, and they had split in the series, and so they got to the ACC tournament championship. We had Brendan Haywood, Joseph Forte, those guys, and we just laid an egg. And I think we ended up losing by 25 or 30 points against the Duke team that ended up winning a national championship. But it was just the way they lost. It looked like they just gave up. And I can remember Dick Vitale, and not enough credit is given to him for how the rivalry has blossomed under his announcement. But, man, some of his calls over the years with the rivalry, just being as intense as it is, and then having him announce the games, he is one of the voices of college basketball. So, but I can remember Carolina had the interlocking NC, and he was saying towards the end of the game, and you got to take that NC off the front of the jersey. You got to put North Carolina across the front of the jersey. He's like, you represent the entire state. He's like, you got to play with some pride and this, that, and the other. He kept on going on. And I was just like, well, he's right. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those games where both programs, especially North Carolina, are prideful, have a lot of pride. So, and that's what this game is all about, leading up into this one. There's a ton of pride on the line. There's bragging rights on the line. I can imagine, my dad still talks about the dream game between Louisville and Kentucky in 83. Yeah, it was in 83, the dream game, and Louisville having bragging rights over Kentucky for years upon years after that. And it was just one of those that it reignited the rivalry, and it forced Kentucky to actually play Louisville on a regular basis. But for them to, it went to overtime, and it wouldn't be a rivalry game if they didn't go to overtime in this game.
Oh man, so, don't tell me that. Do not tell me that, Spence. Stop it. Stop it right now.
There's been too many overtime games. I'd expect no less.
No, gosh, I hope not. I hope not. All right. With all that being said, Spence, I think we've talked enough. I think it's time to get to the part everyone wants to hear.
No, I got a couple of different directions I want to go with this one.
Okay.
So, what was I going to say? I'm going to talk about Roy Williams, because he didn't get his farewell tour.
This guy, he didn't get his farewell tour, so I'm going to give it to him right now. He's the greatest coach in Carolina history.
No, of course, when Roy Williams set foot on campus, Dean Smith said, you can come to North Carolina and become the greatest college basketball coach. And I think his record at North Carolina matches up against anybody in that time frame. From 2003 to 2021, those 18-19 seasons, he had a better run than any other coach in college basketball. 3 national titles. I think it was 6 or 7 Final Fours, 4 national title games. And I don't think Roy has ever really drawn attention to himself. So personally, I think the most fitting retirement gift has been him. I went to the Louisville game this year. He was there. He was interacting with Denny Crum. He's following Hubert and the team around. And he's had a great time cheering on Hubert Davis, and it's a longtime assistant of his. But I think that he really still holds a very close, in his heart of hearts, he's really still close to the Kansas community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a retirement gift for him will be North Carolina for Kansas in the national championship game.
Is that what you're predicting?
My heart says North Carolina. My head says Duke. So in the rivalry, the way it goes in the rivalry, when you have, and I wouldn't say this is an evenly matched game. Of course, I think Duke is a 4-point favorite. I think that's fair. But and they're supposed to win this game. They were always supposed to win this game. But again, it's the rivalry. You never know what to expect. Personally, I think it could be an extremely tight game where it goes to double overtime, or it could be one of those games where the moment is too big for one of these teams and it becomes a blowout. I hope it doesn't become a blowout. I think 15% chance that it'll probably be a blowout one way or the other, where it just snowballs. And I've been in games like that where it just snowballs. And I think 85% chance it's going to be a really tight game. And it's going to be blow for blow, pound for pound, 15 rounds, Ollie, Frazier type stuff. So I don't know what to expect. But I guess the last thing that I want to, and this is for all my Louisville and Kentucky fans out there, and even the Ohio State Michigans and the Auburn Alabamas, there's a reason why Duke and North Carolina is the best rivalry in sports. It's because the last 42 years, like I said before, it's 10 national championships, 27 Final Fours, 16 title game appearances, and they've never met, but 8 miles away from each other, or in Tampa, New York, or Greensboro. The national stage for this rivalry is where it's supposed to be, and what better way to do it than in the Superdome? When you look at Ohio State and Michigan, or Louisville and Kentucky, or even Auburn, Alabama, one team is doing good and the other team isn't doing good. That's the way I see it with all these rivalries. But with Duke and North Carolina, each team is always, for the most part, outside of a couple of seasons, doing really well for them. And that's what people want to see. They want to see 2 teams at the top. And even North Carolina this year, they weren't having a great year. They're in the Final Four. Mm-hmm. Even in years where Duke was down and, they were having a losing season, they weren't going to make the Final Four. They still found a way to send North Carolina and Jerry Stackhouse to 2 overtimes. That's what people want to see. They want to see good games. They want to see drama. People want to be entertained. And Duke and North Carolina has delivered almost every single time. So we will see.
We will see. And I'm going to make my last prediction before the games happen this weekend. And I'm going to roll with the team with the most pressure, and that is going to be the Duke Blue Devils. They have all the pressure on them to deliver. I think they need to just get it done. However, setting up a Duke and Kansas matchup, North Carolina and Roy Williams are not the only ones that have some relativity to the Kansas community. Coach K's first title came against the Jayhawks.
Sure.
I'm expecting
and
Roy. Yep. I'm expecting, well, not with Roy, but I'm going to expect his last title to come against the Jayhawks. So I think it would be very fitting. So that is my last prediction. I'm hoping that my words don't eat, I don't eat my words this weekend and I didn't jinx my Blue Devils. I'm a very superstitious person. So, yeah, I'm going to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So,
Yeah, I'm hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. I wish this was a national title game because, unfortunately, I think the team that wins this game is going to lose in a national championship game. I do have Kansas winning the national championship. There's a lot of preparation and pressure and energy, outside energy, when it comes to a game like this. And even though everybody was talking about, Chris Rock and Will Smith last night, those kids down in Carolina, even though they're 8 miles separated from each other, the only thing that they were thinking about was this game. And so there's a ton of pressure, and there's a ton of outside pressure from the entire state when it comes to the boys in Chapel Hill, and from, Coach Krzyzewski retiring and expecting to be sent off with the Duke players over in Durham. I don't think that I think Kansas will have more energy in the national championship game against whoever they play. So, head says Duke, heart says North Carolina. I don't know what to expect, so I'm not really going to give a prediction. I think it'll be very, very close. And as far as superstition goes, there's a lot of voodoo down there in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's what worries me too.
There's a lot of voodoo down there, and North Carolina seems to be on the winning side of that voodoo.
I knew you were going with that. That's why.
You go with Michael Jordan and, Sleepy Floyd throwing it to James Worthy in 82 and getting Dean Smith his championship. And then you have Chris Webber walking and calling a timeout in 93 and giving Dean Smith his second championship. There's a lot of weird voodoo down there. And then in 2003, Syracuse beating Kansas and Roy Williams for the national championship and sending Roy to North Carolina. There's just a lot of weird things, coincidences. I'm just going to call them coincidences. But there is real voodoo down there in New Orleans. So I don't know what to expect. Maybe there's a witch doctor down there someplace.
I'm hoping Duke is on the good side of that witch doctor because, I definitely. But,
I want to say that he's never played in New Orleans in the NCAA tournament.
I believe you're right. I don't think Coach K has. I don't believe so. But Bean, I think, wanted to make a prediction for a second, but then he just got tired and then just laid down. So, yeah.
As long as you feed me after the game is what he says.
I don't think he has anything to worry about. I think he is well taken care of. Yep. But anyways, that is everything that I think we wanted to talk about today. Matt, as always, or my bad, Spence, as always, glad to have you on the show. Welcome back again. And look forward to having you on the show in future shows potentially. But until next time, that concludes this episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. Follow the social media pages at Less is More Sports. And tell us what you liked, what you didn't like in the comment section below. But until next time, we out.
See you, buddy.